Davis, Political Liberalism and Narrow Cultures, a presentation by Haley Berger. Does Davis have a good response to what she sees as the fundamental tension of political liberalism? To start, political liberalism is a political ideology that centers around the commitment to the individual and strives to construct society around the rights of citizens in order to satisfy their interests, rather than constructing a society and having those within it adjust to the demands of the system. The fundamental tension of political liberalism is that you either get a more autonomous, yet dominant culture with little to no identity markers, or you get a diverse culture with more varying levels of autonomy within the separate communities. With more autonomy and a dominant culture, there is little room for narrow cultures, or cultures that have small populations and a distinct set of core values, such as the Amish, to operate. But in more diverse society, you will have less autonomy because those diverse communities may have conflicting values with one another that limit the right to open future, which is a topic that we will discuss in the next section of the presentation. Dina Davis believes that it is the intention of a liberal democracy to actively promote the greatest breadth of choices for the greatest amount of people. This seemingly implies hostilities towards narrow cultures, or cultures that are very small, in particular in their core values. By this, she means that in order to give individuals the greatest amount of freedom and choices in life, there need to be fewer communities within society that actively disrupt certain choices based on the values held within those communities. Critically evaluate Davis's assessment of the Wisconsin versus Yoder case. Wisconsin versus Yoder, a U.S. Supreme Court case that mandated that Amish children can only be forced to attend public school, kindergarten through 8th grade. Rights and trust and the right to open future. Rights and trust are a unique class of rights that an individual cannot yet exercise, but which they will be able to exercise when they reach maturity. Dina Davis believes that a child, and any other individuals who do not have power over their own autonomy at this point in time, should have the right to choose whatever decision they would like to in the future, and that the individual should not be limited due to their guardian or others' desires. Davis thinks that if you limit a child's right to an open future, you are violating that child's autonomy. Violations of the right to open future. Davis believes that Wisconsin versus Yoder is a violation of the right to open future because this decision actively hindered the autonomy of the Amish children by limiting their future worldly opportunities. Children raised in a closed community such as the Amish would not be able to successfully transition into other communities, thus hindering their ability to choose their own fate. Davis uses this as further evidence that liberal societies should lean towards a more autonomous, dominant society. The violation of the right to open future, which benefits the narrow culture, aka the Amish, limits the freedom of choice for Amish children. Without the demands of the narrow culture, Davis argues that Amish children would have more options and opportunities later on in life. Explain her argument that narrow cultures, such as the Amish, violate the right to open future, and then criticize the argument by generating a counter-argument. Davis argues that because Amish culture is limited in knowledge, such as how to use the internet, how to set up a bank account, how to file taxes, how to change a tire, and etc., it is virtually impossible to navigate the dominant culture as well as many other narrow cultures without introduction to these things at a formative age. Because these cultures limit the blending of their inhabitants with other cultures either directly or indirectly, they limit the freedom in which a child could eventually have when they are able to take control of their own autonomy without the need for oversight, which inherently violates the right to open future. Countering Davis's argument. Sparrow, another philosopher, believes that in order to achieve political liberalism, we need to maintain the cultural economy. The more cultures in which to choose from, the more autonomy and freedom a person has. He also believes that it is not the dominant culture's place to decide what is or isn't limiting within diverse or narrow cultures. In other words, someone needs to have the opportunity to join a variety of cultures, even if those cultures are narrow and particular. Thinking that because someone is conditioned to be able to inhabit the environment in which they were raised, they are predisposed to having less options in the future isn't something only applicable to narrow cultures, as Davis implies. This line of reasoning can be applied to any person, not just those who lived in narrow cultures, as we are all limited through the methods of our upbringing, and pointing fingers at who is most limited because of how they are raised is an impossible task because limitedness is an immeasurable and incomparable subject. Final thoughts. Democratically run societies need political liberalism, else they become fascist. But Davis believes that it is more powerful to have a dominant culture with an equitable or equal amount of autonomy, rather than a society in which communities have varying levels of autonomy. The right to open future is an imperative idea to maintain for someone without access to their own autonomy. Guardian, the guardian of that individual should not take actions that permanently foreclose or preempt the future options of those under their care. Davis's argument stems off the idea that those from the dominant culture can place accurate value upon another culture, but since the idea of opportunity and limitation are subjective, it is hard to rationalize this line of thinking when discussing what is best for all individuals who live under a politically liberal society. Thank you for your time.